The morning sun glowed faintly behind a curtain of fog as Amara stepped out of the old blue bus. The massive iron gates of St. Helena's Academy rose before her like the doors to another world, polished, proud, and far beyond anything she'd ever known. Her heart thudded inside her chest as she adjusted the strap of her worn-out brown backpack. The school looked like something out of a movie. Tall glass buildings, manicured lawns, and shiny cars lined up along the curb. Everything screamed money. Amara, 16, quiet and soft-spoken, came from a modest neighborhood on the other side of the city. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, had saved for years just to afford Amara's admission here. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but fresh starts don't come easy when you already feel like you don't belong. She took a slow breath and walked through the gates, trying to ignore the stares that followed. Her uniform fit differently. It wasn't tailored like the others. The fabric looked a little faded, and her shoes, though clean, weren't the latest trend everyone else seemed to wear. "Nice shoes," someone whispered behind her. Laughter followed. Amara didn't turn around. She kept walking, pretending not to hear. The first class was worse. When she introduced herself, her voice trembled slightly, and her accent, soft, musical, and different, caught everyone's attention. "Where are you from, again?" a girl asked, smiling too sweetly. Amara hesitated. "From, the South Side." The same girl, Naomi, turned to her friends, Jade and Tina, and smirked. "Oh, that explains it," the class laughed. Even the teacher, Mr. Graham, didn't say a word. He just told Amara to take a seat. She sat in the back, trying to shrink into her chair. At lunch, Amara sat under a tree near the courtyard, carefully unpacking her homemade sandwich. Around her, groups of students gathered in circles, laughing, showing each other their phones, and posting pictures online. She didn't have an account on any of those platforms. Her mother always said, "Focus on what's real, not what's on a screen." Still, watching them made her chest ache. She wanted to belong, to be seen. Across the lawn, Naomi was surrounded by her usual followers. Her glossy curls bounced as she laughed loudly at something on her phone. Then, her eyes met Amara's. A slow smile spread across Naomi's lips, cold, knowing. "Hey, Amara," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Love your bag. Is it vintage?" The word vintage hung in the air like poison. Jade and Tina giggled as Amara looked down at her thrift store canvas bag. Clean, but clearly old. Her fingers tightened around it. She tried to smile politely, then quickly turned away. But she could still hear them laughing. The day dragged on. Every small whisper felt like a knife. Her accent, her clothes, her quietness, it all became material for jokes whispered just loud enough for her to hear. During English class, when Mr. Graham asked for volunteers to read, Amara raised her hand. It took courage, but the moment she began reading, a fake cough came from behind her, followed by a mocking imitation of her voice. The class erupted into quiet giggles. Mr. Graham frowned but didn't say a word. He just moved on. Amara sat down, her cheeks burning. She wanted to disappear. When the final bell rang, Amara walked down the hallway, keeping her eyes low. The laughter of her classmates echoed behind her. She passed posters for the upcoming school fashion event. Bright colors and bold letters that read, "Be your best self." The words stung. Outside, students climbed into shiny cars where drivers held doors open for them. Amara waited until the crowd thinned before walking to the bus stop. The evening wind was cool against her face, but inside she felt heavy. Every moment from the day replayed in her mind like a cruel movie. Each laugh, each whisper, each careless look. That night, at home, her mother greeted her with a tired smile and a plate of food. "How was your first day?" she asked. Amara forced a smile. "It was fine, Mom, just different." Her mother reached across the table, squeezed her hand. "You'll get used to it. Just be yourself, sweetheart." Amara nodded. She didn't have the heart to tell her how much it hurt to be herself. The next day, things didn't change. If anything, the silence grew louder. People avoided sitting near her. Naomi and her friends whispered and laughed every time she passed. The teachers stayed detached, too busy to notice the quiet war happening in the hallways. By the third day, Amara had stopped trying to speak up. She simply moved through the school like a ghost, invisible and unheard. At lunch, she found a quiet staircase tucked away near the back of the building. Dusty sunlight streamed through a high window, falling across the worn steps. Amara sat down, her lunch untouched beside her. From where she sat, she could see the courtyard filled with laughter, music, and bright colors, everything she was shut out from. She rested her chin on her knees and watched. Her eyes glistened, but she refused to let the tears fall. Her reflection in the window looked small and tired, but there was still a faint light in her eyes, fragile, but alive. In that silence, Amara made a small promise to herself. She didn't know what would come next, or if things would ever get better, but she wouldn't break. Not yet. The camera lingers on her sitting alone, sunlight framing her small figure against the stairwell window. A quiet image of loneliness and unspoken strength. The following week dragged like a storm cloud over Amara's every step. Every hallway, every classroom felt heavier than the last. Naomi's whispers trailed her like shadows, and her followers, Jade and Tina, seemed to appear at every turn, eyes gleaming with quiet malice. Then came the announcement. "Next Friday, the school fashion showcase." A poster screamed in bold letters along the corridor walls. Naomi appeared the next morning, her perfectly arched eyebrows raised in false excitement. "Amara!" she called, her tone dripping sweetness. "You have to join. Everyone will be there. It's your chance to shine." Amara's stomach twisted. Naomi's smile didn't reach her eyes. It was sharp, calculated. But the words struck a tiny chord of hope inside Amara. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to belong. Maybe, finally, someone would see her for who she was. Friday came, warm and bright, but Amara's hands trembled as she stood backstage with the other students. Naomi and her clique whispered behind her. "Make sure you don't trip." "Though it'd be hilarious if you did." Amara took a deep breath, holding on to the small hope that this could be different. She glanced at her reflection in the dressing room mirror. Her outfit, carefully chosen and modest, reflected nothing but her quiet effort to belong. Then it happened. The stage lights turned on. The music started. Amara stepped forward and froze. Her outfit was gone. Instead, she wore tattered clothes, patched in places, a mismatched skirt, and worn-out shoes. She could hear the laughter before she even looked up. The crowd erupted in cruel cheers and snickers. Phones were raised instantly, cameras flashing, recording every humiliating second. Her face burned crimson. Her mouth opened to speak, but no sound came. Her legs felt weak, like jelly beneath her. She wanted to run, but the spotlight pinned her in place. Naomi's laughter rang louder than the music. Jade and Tina pointed, doubled over in mockery, and Amara's classmates whispered, some filming, others just laughing quietly. The world felt small and suffocating. "Please, stop," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. But no one heard. Every moment stretched endlessly. Each step she took was mocked. Every glance, every laugh, every whisper tore into her chest. The weight of humiliation pressed down like a physical force. Finally, she ran. She didn't even look back. She fled off the stage, her shoes scuffing the floor, her stomach tight with panic. She burst into the girls' bathroom, slammed the door behind her, and sank to the ground. Her shoulders shook as tears finally spilled freely. "Why do I even try?" she whispered. clutching her knees. Why can't I just disappear? Her phone buzzed. A message from her mother. Hope your day is going well, sweetie. I know you'll make friends soon. Amara stared at the screen, her tears blurring the words. She wanted to tell her mother everything, to let her in, but the shame felt too heavy to share. Instead, she put the phone aside and hugged her knees tighter. She felt small, invisible, worthless. Hours passed, though she didn't notice. The bathroom lights flickered above, the echo of her own breathing the only sound. She pressed her face against the cold tile, wishing she could disappear into it. She thought about quitting the school, going back to her old life where no one laughed at her. But even the thought felt terrifying. Facing Naomi's laughter again would be unbearable. Her heart ached, pounding with a mixture of fear, anger, and sadness. The walls of the bathroom felt like they were closing in, mirroring the walls that had already closed around her life. By the time she left the bathroom, the hallway was nearly empty. Her reflection in the polished tiles showed a girl hollowed by pain, but clinging to a fragile thread of strength. She didn't know it yet, but this thread, the quiet refusal to completely break, was the seed of something stronger, something that would grow far beyond Naomi's laughter. For now, all she could do was take slow steps back to her classroom, shoulders hunched, cheeks still damp with tears. The world outside the bathroom seemed brighter, almost mocking, but she kept moving forward. She didn't know what awaited her. All she knew was the crushing weight of humiliation, and the small, stubborn ember of herself that refused to be entirely extinguished. The camera lingers on her reflection in the hallway tile as she walks forward, head slightly bowed, but eyes holding on to a faint glimmer of quiet resilience. It was a Tuesday morning when Amara hesitated at the gates of St. Helena's Academy. The memory of the fashion show still burned in her chest like a raw wound. She had barely slept the night before, her pillow damp with tears she couldn't fully shed. Her steps were slow, reluctant. Every laugh in the courtyard, every whisper in the hallways felt heavier than before. She didn't want to come back, but she also didn't want to run away forever. Then she noticed it. A sleek black car, polished to a mirror shine, rolled up smoothly to the front of the school. The engine's quiet hum drew the attention of students milling about the gates. Heads turned, and whispers spread like wildfire. Who's that for? Some parent? Or maybe a celebrity guest? Amara froze. The car's doors opened. A well-dressed man in his early 30s stepped out, sharp suit, confident posture, and an aura that seemed to make the air around him still. His eyes were calm, piercing, yet kind, an authority you didn't challenge, even without words. He walked directly toward Amara. "Amara Benson?" he called, his voice smooth but firm. Her stomach lurched. Every student nearby turned to look. Naomi's smirk faltered for the first time. Jade and Tina whispered to each other, confused. Amara's first instinct was to run, but something in the man's gaze stopped her. There was no judgment, no mockery, only a quiet certainty that made her want to obey, to follow, even without knowing why. "Come with me," he said gently. Naomi's voice cut through the tense air. "Ha! Who does he think he is? Some rich uncle? Charity worker? You're dreaming, newbie!" The surrounding students giggled. Some filmed the scene on their phones, eager for new gossip. Amara's heart pounded. Fear and curiosity wrestled inside her. She looked back at the school, at Naomi's smirk, at the laughing crowd, and then at the man who stood patiently. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she stepped toward the black car. The driver opened the rear door. The cool metal handle felt foreign in her hand. She glanced at the crowd one last time, her chest tight with a mix of anxiety and something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The man, whose name she would soon learn was Eli, gave a small, reassuring nod. The car door shut behind her, and the engine purred to life. As it drove away from the school, the courtyard receded, students shrinking into the distance. Amara pressed her forehead against the glass, watching the familiar world slip away. Fear lingered, like a shadow on her shoulder. But there was also a strange, unexplainable sense of safety. For the first time in days, she didn't feel entirely alone. The streets passed in a blur, city lights reflecting on the car windows, unfamiliar buildings rushing past. Amara's mind raced with questions. Who was he? Why had he come for her? Was this real, or another cruel trick? But every doubt was quieted by the feeling that something bigger than her humiliation, bigger than her fear, was waiting ahead. She finally dared to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Where are we going?" Eli didn't answer immediately. He glanced at her through the rearview mirror, a soft, patient smile on his lips. "Somewhere you need to be," he said simply. Amara closed her eyes, leaning back in the seat. Her hands rested on her lap, trembling slightly. She thought of the laughter, the shame, the endless teasing that had followed her since her first day. And now, somehow, all of that seemed to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity, a fragile sense of possibility. For the first time, she realized that her story wasn't over. Not yet. Outside, the school disappeared from view. Inside the car, the world seemed to shrink down to a quiet cocoon of safety, mystery, and anticipation. Amara didn't know what awaited her at the end of this journey, but for the first time in weeks, she felt ready to see it. The camera lingers on her reflection in the tinted car window, eyes wide, lips slightly parted, a mix of fear, hope, and the faintest glimmer of courage. The black car glided through the city streets, leaving behind the familiar chaos of schoolyard laughter, rumors, and judgment. Amara pressed her forehead lightly against the window, watching buildings rush past in a blur of glass and steel. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, fear, confusion, and a strange, fragile curiosity battling inside her. Finally, the car stopped in front of a sleek building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the bright morning sun, and a sign near the entrance read, Eli Donovan, Creative Director. Amara's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen a place like this. Everything gleamed. Polished floors, walls lined with mannequins draped in exquisite fabrics, and racks of clothing that looked like they belonged in a magazine. Eli stepped out first, opening the door for her. His posture was calm, commanding, but there was a softness in his gaze that put her at ease. "Welcome," he said, gesturing toward the studio. "I know this all seems sudden, but you're exactly where you need to be." Amara hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of her backpack. I don't understand. Why me?" Eli led her inside, past a row of mannequins wearing gowns that shimmered like liquid light. "I saw you," he said finally, pausing to meet her gaze. "I saw the way they treated you, and the way you carried yourself through it. Grace under cruelty is rare. You didn't fight. You didn't yell. You stood your ground with dignity. That's what caught my attention." Amara's stomach twisted. Are you serious? They made me look ridiculous." "I'm nothing special." Eli shook his head slowly. "No, you are more than you know. And that's exactly why I'm here." He guided her to a quiet corner of the studio where soft, natural light spilled across a row of empty chairs. "I lost someone once," he said, his voice quieter now. "My sister, she faced the same kind of cruelty. She didn't survive it. I couldn't save her, but maybe I can help others. I created a scholarship and mentorship program for young people like you, talented, overlooked, underestimated, and I want you to be the first to join it." Amara's eyes widened. Her hands shook, brushing against the hem of her sweater. "Me? But I don't know anything about fashion or being seen." "That's the point," Eli said gently. "This isn't about pity. It's about power, purpose and giving your voice a chance to be heard. You have a strength they didn't see, the kind that changes people's lives. I want to help you find it." Tears pricked Amara's eyes. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. For so long she had felt invisible, worthless, and humiliated. And now, here was a stranger, believing in her in a way she had never experienced before. I don't know if I can," she whispered. Eli smiled, patient and unwavering. "You don't have to know yet. That's why I'm here, to guide you." The next few weeks became a whirlwind of learning, discovery, and transformation. Montage. Amara stood in front of mirrors, trying on elegant clothes that felt like a second skin. She adjusted her posture, shoulders back, chin lifted. Each movement was practiced, deliberate, and confident. Eli guided her through storytelling exercises, teaching her to express herself not through words alone, but through presence and poise. She learned to walk with intention, to hold herself with quiet authority, to let her voice be heard even in silence. Alone in her room, she practiced in front of the mirror, tracing invisible lines on the floor, imagining herself on the stage she had once fled. Each session chipped away at the self-doubt that had clung to her like a shadow. Slowly, Amara felt herself returning. Not the timid girl who hid in stairwells, but a young woman discovering her power, her voice and her presence. One evening, as she left the studio, Eli handed her a folded note. "For tomorrow," he said. "Remember, this is just the beginning." Amara unfolded it. In neat handwriting, it read, "You are stronger than their laughter, braver than their whispers, and capable of more than you can imagine." Her heart swelled. She had spent so long carrying shame, hiding from ridicule and believing herself invisible. Now, for the first time, she felt seen, not for the mistakes, not for the humiliation, but for her courage, her resilience, her potential. The city lights sparkled as she walked home that evening, the air crisp and full of possibility. She had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but the fear that had once paralyzed her was now tempered with a flicker of determination. Amara glanced at her reflection in a shop window, adjusting her shoulders, chin raised slightly. The girl staring back was still learning, still unsure, but no longer broken. For the first time, she believed that she could rise above the cruelty, above the laughter, above the whispers. She could reclaim her story. The camera lingers on Amara walking down the city street, lights reflecting in her eyes. A young girl transformed, poised at the edge of her own power and potential. Weeks passed in a blur of preparation, training, and quiet transformation. Amara moved through each day with purpose, learning to hold herself with a poise she had never imagined. She had grown taller in presence, if not in height, her shoulders back, her gaze steady, her steps deliberate. Then the announcement came from St. Helena's Academy. The school would host a charity gala, funded by a prominent foundation, inviting students, parents, and community leaders. Everyone buzzed with excitement. Amara arrived early that evening, stepping out of a sleek black car, the same one that had carried her away weeks ago. Her dress was simple but radiant, the fabric catching the soft glow of streetlights. Her hair framed her face perfectly, and the faintest hint of a confident smile tugged at her lips. Students gathered near the entrance. Naomi's eyes widened. Jade and Tina froze, unsure what to say. Their laughter from before had vanished. The very girl they had mocked, humiliated, and whispered about was now the center of attention. "Who is she?" whispered a student. "Amara Benson," another replied. "She's different." Inside the gala, the lights were warm, golden, and inviting. Amara walked through the crowd with calm assurance, her every step measured. She didn't need to push herself to be seen. They were already watching. Eli met her at the entrance, a quiet smile on his face. "Ready?" he asked. Amara nodded. "I think so," The moment came. She was called to the stage as the keynote speaker. The music faded. Conversations hushed. Hundreds of eyes turned to her. For a heartbeat, Amara felt the familiar pang of fear, the memory of the fashion show, the laughter, the shame. But this time, it didn't paralyze her. She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and stepped forward. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I want to tell you a story. Not about me, but about all of us." She spoke about kindness, dignity, and resilience. She told stories of overlooked students, of small victories, of moments when courage outweighed fear. She never named her bullies, but every word cut through the hall like sunlight piercing clouds. Heads turned, eyes widened, and even the teachers who had once ignored her looked on in awe. Applause erupted. Not polite, not obligatory, but genuine. Back in the audience, Naomi sat frozen, the color draining from her face. She whispered to Jade and Tina, a rare tremor in her voice. I didn't know she's... But Amara didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice in triumph or point fingers. She simply let her presence, her calm authority, and her story speak for itself. After the applause, Amara stepped down from the stage. Eli approached, eyes glowing with quiet pride. "You did it," he said softly. "I did more than survive," Amara whispered. "I became something I never thought I could." Across the room, Naomi tried to meet her gaze. Words faltered, then escaped in a small, shaky apology. I'm sorry, Amara." Amara paused, her heart steady. She took a slow breath. "I don't need an apology to forgive you," she said. Naomi's shoulders sagged, guilt washing over her. For the first time, she understood that humiliation had consequences, and that kindness and dignity were far more powerful than cruelty. The gala continued, but for Amara, the night had changed everything. She was no longer the quiet, trembling girl in the stairwell. She was seen, respected, and finally in control of her story. Later, as she stepped outside, the black car waited, gleaming in the streetlight. Eli opened the door, but this time, Amara didn't wait for him. She stepped forward, opened the door herself, and slid into the driver's seat. A small gesture, yet a profound symbol of agency and rebirth. She looked at the city streets ahead, the lights reflecting in her eyes. She thought of Naomi, of the laughter, of the whispered cruelty, and realized she had already left all of it behind. Amara reached for the steering wheel, not to drive, but to anchor herself in the knowledge that she had transformed pain into strength, humiliation into courage, and fear into purpose. The camera lingers on Amara's reflection in the car window, her expression calm, poised, and radiant. The city glimmers around her, echoing the brilliance she now carries inside. For the first time, she smiles, not timidly, but fully, knowing the story is finally hers. The weeks after the gala were unlike anything Amara had ever imagined. She no longer walked through the hallways of St. Helena's Academy with hesitation or fear. Heads turned, yes, but this time not in mockery. Whispers followed her, but they were filled with admiration, curiosity, and respect. Eli's mentorship had become more than just lessons in poise and presence. It had become a life-changing journey, teaching her that her value wasn't determined by the laughter of others, but by her courage, her choices, and the strength she carried inside. She began working with Eli's foundation full-time, helping other students who were overlooked or bullied. Each story she heard reminded her of herself, the scared girl in the stairwell, the one who had been laughed at, the one who had almost given up. And each student she helped became another thread in the tapestry of hope she was weaving. Back at school, changes rippled through the student body. Conversations turned from ridicule to support. Students who had once laughed at others began to stand up against cruelty, inspired by Amara's story and her unwavering grace. Teachers noticed, parents noticed, and slowly, the culture of humiliation began to shift. Amara often revisited the staircase where she had eaten lunch alone, clutching her thrift store bag, her chest tight with loneliness. But now, it looked different. Sunlight poured through the windows, the steps worn but no longer intimidating. She climbed the stairs and saw a group of younger students sitting nearby, laughing, sharing stories, and helping each other with homework. Their smiles were bright, unguarded, and full of possibility. One of the students looked up and waved. "Amara, come sit with us." Amara smiled and joined them. She set her bag down beside her and laughed. A clear, unrestrained sound. She realized that this same staircase, once a place of isolation, had become a symbol of growth, of connection, of light after darkness. Her phone buzzed. A message from Eli. "You changed the story. Not just yours, but theirs too." Amara held the phone close, feeling warmth spread through her chest. It was more than recognition. It was validation that her journey, her courage, her transformation had meaning beyond herself. She glanced out the window. The black car gleamed in the afternoon light, parked and waiting. But this time, she didn't feel like a passenger in someone else's story. She opened the car door herself, stepping inside with confidence, carrying agency, strength, and self-assurance. The city streets rolled past, but the world outside didn't matter as much as the world inside her. She had reclaimed her voice. She had reclaimed her power. And she had learned that humiliation, cruelty, and fear could never define her unless she allowed them to. That evening, as she walked home through the quiet streets, she thought about Naomi, Jade, Tina, and the students who had laughed at her. She didn't feel anger or bitterness. Instead, she felt compassion, a quiet understanding that their cruelty stemmed from fear, insecurity, and ignorance. She had forgiven them, not for their sake, but for hers. In her reflection in a shop window, she saw a young woman transformed. Her eyes shone with clarity, her posture was tall and unwavering, and her smile was radiant. Gone was the timid girl who had crouched in the stairwell, hiding from the world. In her place stood someone resilient, brave, and unstoppable. At home that night, her mother hugged her tightly. "You've changed, Amara. I can see it in your eyes." Amara nodded, her heart full. "I've learned that the world can be cruel, but it can also be kind, and I can choose how I respond." Her mother's eyes glistened with tears. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Always have been, always will be." Amara pressed her forehead against her mother's shoulder. For the first time, she felt truly seen, safe, and loved. Days later, at the Foundation's studio, Amara helped organize a workshop for young students who had been bullied. She guided them gently, shared her story, and taught them how to stand tall, how to reclaim their voice, and how to find light even in the darkest moments. She watched as the students laughed, encouraged each other, and shared their dreams. It reminded her of herself, not long ago, the scared, isolated girl, and she knew that every small action, every word of encouragement, could create a ripple of change. Amara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She realized that her pain had transformed into purpose, and her journey of suffering had become a beacon of hope for others. That evening, as the sun set, Amara returned one last time to the staircase. It was empty, quiet, bathed in golden light. She sat down, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. The laughter, the isolation, the tears, they all belonged to the past. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Eli. "Keep shining. You've made a difference, and the world is better for it." Amara smiled, holding the phone close. She glanced toward the black car waiting outside, then at her reflection in the window. This time she didn't hesitate. She stood tall, opened the door herself, and stepped inside. Not as a passenger in someone else's story, but as the author of her own. Her eyes met her reflection in the tinted window, strong, radiant, and full of life. The journey from humiliation to empowerment, from silence to strength, had come full circle. As the car drove away, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver. Amara leaned back in her seat, a calm smile on her lips. For the first time, she knew the truth. No one could take